And speaking of double hot, we've got Scott McLaughlin joining us now here on the WEEI Afternoon program, hot off that column that I was reading. Scott, you said Jim Montgomery threw a Hail Mary, and it didn't exactly work like it did for Jaden Daniels and the Commanders. So I guess we have to just start. How much longer do you think Jim Montgomery will be the coach of the Bruins?
It honestly feels like it's like game to game at this point. This is the situation that Don Sweeney has set up where you didn't sign him to an extension before the season. You know, said preseason, hey, we've talked to him about an extension. Okay, that's not actually getting it done. Now you go into the season with him not being signed beyond this year, and you get off to a bad start. And, like, in any sport, and especially in the NHL, in that situation where you have a lame duck coach and a team not playing up to its capabilities, or at least what you think its capabilities are, the questions begin about, is there going to be a change? And we've heard it locally. National guys like Darren Dreger have said, you know, management and ownership are having tough conversations. Like, that situation invites this when you don't start well. We have not heard from Don Sweeney since the season started, so there's been no public vote of confidence. I don't have any sources telling me like this is happening, this weekend or whatever, but let's just look at it. Like, you have the Flyers again on Saturday. Seems as of now that, Montgomery's still the coach for that game. That's a team that just shut them out on Tuesday. The Flyers have, prior to that game, were giving up the most goals in the NHL. So, say things go poorly against Saturday. All right, where do you stand now? Like, questions certainly aren't going to stop. An okay Seattle team comes into the Garden on Sunday. It feels like, a bad weekend. You have to do something. And if you're the general manager, there's basically two things. One is a trade away a core player, shake things up that way, and get guys' attention.
That feels early.
And the other is fire the coach. Like, those, throughout history, those are the two options that GMs have in this situation.
I'm kind of with Milbury, though. I mean, Jim Montgomery didn't go out there and give up 6 goals on the first 16 shots out of the first, 22 shots he faced. In Swayman, we were, Andy and I are mostly football guys, but I think even at some point on the Six Rings pod, we were sort of comparing the Swayman thing to how a lot of times in holdouts in the NFL, like, oh, here comes an injury, or, they're not in football shape by the time they get out there. It feels like he's in an extended preseason right now, and he's certainly playing that way. It hasn't hasn't had a signature game just yet. I don't think it's a bad investment. But to blame the coach, this feels like scapegoat city. To just go from greatest regular season in NHL history to 18 months later, like, this guy's no good, they've tuned him out, and the players aren't playing for him anymore, I don't buy it.
Yeah, and I don't even know if they've necessarily tuned him out in the sense that, like, I don't think they're ignoring the points he's trying to coach. It seems like for whatever reason they just can't do it. It's like everyone knows how they want to play, and they're not playing that way. They want to play fast, north-south, forecheck, physical, get to the front of the net. They're not playing fast. They're not forechecking because they're not getting there on time. They're not getting to the front of the net. They are, I think, 30th in the NHL in high danger chances. Like, they're not generating good chances. So, it's like Montgomery can tell them what to do, but it's clearly, and I think guys want to play that way. Like, you talk to them in the locker room and, that they're not giving off a vibe of, like, panicking. Like, it's like they know what they need to do, but for whatever reason, game after game, they cannot do it. And now this week, it has clearly gotten worse. Like, getting shut out by the Flyers and then losing 8-2 to Carolina, those are, like, straight up, and those aren't just, like, losses in tough games. Those are, like, straight up embarrassing performances.
As an old school hockey guy, I know a famous player once said, "You miss 100% of the shots you don't take." This team doesn't get any shots. Forget about goals; they don't get any shots.
Yeah.
Why are they not getting like? What's the problem there in terms of not being able to like create offensive opportunities? Is it just what you're saying that they aren't fast enough? Because that's the other question when you were answering that, kind of tying that in. Is it that they want to be fast and aren't playing fast, or are they not fast enough? Are they a slow team?
Yeah, 15 shots on net is pathetic.
Yeah, and that, Andy, that's kind of like the $64,000 question here is, like Mike Milbury brought this up during his appearance on the Greg Hill show too. Is like, are they actually just a slow team, or are they out of shape and playing slow, or like what's going wrong there? And both are fair, because Cam Neely said after last season, we need to get faster. And then they didn't really make moves that made them faster. Like the guys they brought in, I think, are better skaters than people are giving them credit for. Like even Nikita Zadorov, like I hear people saying like, oh, he's just like a big lug. Like Nikita Zadorov is actually a pretty good skater for a guy his size, for a defenseman. Max Jones is a good skater. He keeps taking penalties, so like he's not staying in the lineup. Like Mark Kastelik on the fourth line is a good skater, and you've seen that. He's been one of the few guys who has actually lived up to expectations. Or in his case, exceeded them a lot. But yeah, as a team, there's no question they are playing slow. They are losing a lot of foot races. As I said, they're not arriving on time on the forecheck. So even if you want to go in there and hit a guy, if he's already moved the puck by the time you get there, then it doesn't matter what you want to do. Like, you're either taking a penalty or you're turning back up ice and playing defense now. So, something is just so off, because they have so many guys who are just dramatically underperforming, where it's like, even if maybe they missed on the offseason in the sense that the moves they made weren't going to put them over the top to be a Stanley Cup team, this roster is still plenty good enough to be a playoff team. It is not lose 5 out of 6 bad. It is not lose 8-2 to Carolina bad.
Right.
Like, so like there's a clear disconnect and just disjointedness in this team, where people have made the observation that like it looks like they haven't played together before, and that is how it looks. Like the chemistry's not there, the way they want to play isn't there, and that's where you look at Montgomery and it's like, well, is that a coaching thing, or is something going on with the players where, I don't know, they weren't ready to go this season, or they're not ready to go now? Like, why does it look as bad as it does?
Scott McLaughlin from the Skate Pod and WEI.com joining us here on the WEI Afternoons in studio. How long do you think then, Scott, could ownership, do you think like Neely and Milbury would let if they think like, okay, that's clearly what Milbury said this morning on the Greg Hill show. So if they believe this is a players related issue and they don't want to take it out on Monty yet, how much more slack could you see them cutting him? Like quarter of the season, all-star break, 4 games? Or is it just could it be game to game? Like if they lose 4-0 tomorrow and they're just absolutely non-competitive once again, could we see something by the week?
Yeah, I mean, at some point it snowballs enough where you have to do something. And whether you think it's Montgomery's fault or not, and I certainly don't put this all on him at all. At some point you have to do something. And like I said, the two options are change the coach or change the roster in a meaningful way, not like send down, fringe forward X and call someone up, or sign Tyler Johnson, which is still something I think they should do. He's a veteran who's still around skating with them at practice that they haven't signed for some reason. But like something bigger than that gets guys' attention, because it feels like they need like a true wake-up call to kind of get everyone's attention and get them focused, sparked, whatever. And Montgomery's tried probably just about everything he can think of, whether it's changing the lines, yelling at them in practice, which he did on Wednesday, yelling at Marchand on the bench. Like, he's trying stuff and none of it is clicking. So at some point, if you're the general manager, you need to act. And I would say sooner rather than later. Like, I don't know if you wait till Thanksgiving or Christmas. Matt Porter had something in the Boston Globe today about teams that are out of the playoffs on November. People always talk about Thanksgiving. Mm-hmm. Teams that are out of the playoff picture on November 1st, over, I forget how many years he went back, but it was like 27% made the playoffs. Like, you're already playing catch up. You're out of the playoffs right now. So, I know, like, standings-wise, it's like, everyone's kind of jumbled together. But you fall behind further, it is hard to make up ground in the NHL. It's a 3-point system. Every overtime loss, you get a point. Teams that get off to hot starts, by and large, stay there and are hard to catch.
So Rich Keefe's report on the midday show was that barring a turnaround or something of that phrase, what's a turnaround? Like, is it, do they just need one win right now, and is that the first step? Do they need to get back in the playoff picture? Do you have an idea what would be perceived as, quote-unquote, righting the ship at this point?
I think it needs to be 4, 5, 6 good games in a row. So, like, 2 weeks of good, solid play. Mm-hmm. And there might be losses in there, but they have to be losses where you played well. And this team has not been able to string together games. Like, they went out to Colorado, had a good win, beat, an Avalanche team that was reeling a little bit. They were off to a slow start of their own, but nonetheless, everyone knows that's a good team. That was a nice win. Then they lost the next 3, including getting shut out by a Nashville team that had not won to that point, and getting blown off the ice by Dallas at home. Mm-hmm. Then they bounced back. They beat Toronto in overtime, right? Like, pretty good win. Even though we all like to mock Toronto, that's a pretty good team. All right, there's something to build off. You get the emotional high of Marchand scoring in overtime. You respond this week with the losses to Philly and Carolina. Like, one game is definitely not enough. They've shown they can win one game every week and a half. Like, it needs to be 2 weeks straight of good play, 4, 5, 6 games.
So your goaltender on the season, Jeremy Swayman, signed in the offseason for 8 years, $66 million. Played in 8 games. He's 3-4-1. Not great. The 3.6 goals against average is stupefying. I mean, I didn't expect that we were going to see Patrick Waugh, 2.0 this season or for the next half decade or more. But he's like skating him. Now, of course, a lot of this also can go back to defense. I understand it's not always just a goaltender's fault, but he's not himself yet by any stretch. Could there be too much? Could there be too much pressure on him now?
I don't think so. I mean, I think he likes pressure. Like, I think he's the kind of guy who thrives under that. But yeah, no question, he hasn't been good enough. I don't think he's been the number one reason they've lost any of these games. I don't even think he's given up really that many truly soft goals.
Okay.
But he's not in the NHL, it's not good enough to just make the saves you're supposed to make. That makes you a below average goalie in the NHL. You need to take goals off the board, especially if you are going to be paid like one of the very best goalies in the world. You need to bail your team out when they need bailing out. And that is what Swayman has not done yet this season. He has not bailed them out. He has not, made the just taken a goal off the board at a moment in the game where they just need him to be there. If you look at like goals saved above expected, which just tells you, okay, here's what would be expected for you to give up based on number of shots you face, quality, all that. 58 goalies in the NHL have played at least 3 games so far. He is 44th in goals saved above expected. Like, not good enough. Past seasons, he's been consistently top 10, top 5. So, yeah, like, he has a lot of work to do. He looks like a goalie who missed all of training camp in the preseason, and I know he worked out over at BU. Great place. As I said here,
who's heading over there?
As I sit here, my BU shirt, getting ready to head over there tonight. But like that's not an NHL preseason. So yeah, it looks like he's still ramping up, and unfortunately, the Bruins have needed to lean on him and needed him to steal some games, and he has not been able to.
So I know I haven't been in this full-time radio show thing long, but I do know that one of the classic questions you have to ask a caller when they say, I want to fire the coach or manager is, well, who are you going to replace him with? So let's play a radio. Let's just say Jim Montgomery loses his job. Who are some of the candidates to replace him as the Bruins coach?
Well, they have 2 guys on staff that they interviewed last time this job was open when they fired Bruce Cassidy, and that's Joe Sacco, who has been around a long time on Montgomery's staff and Cassidy's staff before that, and Jay Leach, who was formerly Providence Bruins head coach. They liked him. He left to become assistant coach in Seattle with the Kraken, and now he's back as an assistant coach here this year. So you start there. Those are very obvious in-house choices. Even if you just give them the interim label, plug them right in. Outside of that, I don't know if they would want to expand to like a wider search in season. That's obviously tough. There's not a lot of coaches hanging around right
Bill
now.
Belichick's available.
True, yeah.
That would be absolutely perfect. Let's add something else to his daily docket as well.
I mean, good coach can coach, right? Didn't he say a good coach is a good coach? That's how he sold Matt Patricia to us. He's a good coach, right?
Sure,
He can coach
he'll be
hockey.
the Matt Patricia of the Boston Bruins as well.
Bill's busy. He's on a beach somewhere. With his girl.
No,
We'll
he's
get to
showing
that
he's
later.
showing off with his girlfriend right now. Meanwhile,
Each
Linda
post
Holiday
is worse than the
what an
last.
amazing week of costumes. Anyway, see, this is already more pleasant than talking about the lowly start for the Bruins. So they have two guys, Leach and Sacco.
And Joe Sacco.
Are they hardos? Are they like hardo coaches? Because that's the theory we've been kind of bandying about. The Parcells to Carroll to Belichick, the pendulum swings in different directions. Is one guy too nice? Do you make up for it? Bring it? Are either of those two guys hardos?
Yeah, and it's not a young team, right? By any stretch.
They definitely got younger. They
Younger,
are actually,
right.
they're like the sixth youngest team in the NHL
Really?
this season. Yeah, which, hey, maybe that's part of the problem. Like in past seasons, they've had a lot of veteran leaders around.
Right.
And this season, it's Marchand, then your alternate captains in Pasternak and McAvoy, and I think there's only two other guys who are 30. Maybe I think it's Charlie Coyle and Hampus Lindholm. Like
Elias,
it is.
isn't he 30?
I think he's turning 30. He's like right around there.
Okay.
Yeah. But yeah, like it's there. So there's not that, group of like 8 to 10 guys who have been around the league for 10 years, like there has been in past seasons. As far as whether they're hardos, I don't know if I'd describe them that way. Joe Sacco did kind of have that reputation. His only other NHL head coaching gig, which was in Colorado, like 13 years ago. And that didn't really work. That was a young team that had kind of like just drafted Landeskog and some other key guys for their rebuild. And he didn't really mesh with them, and it didn't last long. It wasn't very successful. But from people I've heard from, like, he's changed a lot over the years and kind of learned better how to deal with young players. So I don't know if that means he's softened up, or could he still turn on, that hard switch if he needed to, if that was what the Bruins were looking for. It's been so long since he's done it as a head coach that, it would be interesting to see what his style would be.
All right, Scott, before we let you go, just put some odds on it. Let's just say 10 days from now, Jim Montgomery will or will not be the Bruins head coach.
I'm gonna. So I don't know what the odds would be, but like I would, if I could get decent odds on it, I unfortunately would probably bet no, because I don't know that this team can just turn it around that quickly. Like that their problems just seem so deep right now. Like they're playing objectively bad hockey, and that is tough to turn around in just one game or one weekend. And again, because he's not signed after the season, like Montgomery is the easy fall guy, and it's the easy change for Sweeney to make to try to spark this team.
Yeah, I on the way out, I know we're up against it anyway, but I just want to ask, why do you think that the guy takes him to the greatest record of all time? They make it back to the postseason last year. By and large, seems like he's their guy, and yet he doesn't get the deal before the season starts. What is it that you think of, just real quick? What is it about him that maybe that they made them say, okay, prove it again?
I think that they're not totally sold on the playoff performances. Obviously, the greatest regular season team ever falls in the first round to Florida. And then last year, they almost blow a 3-1 lead again in the first round. They survived Toronto in overtime in Game 7. And then you take Florida to 6, but some of those games weren't very competitive. Some of them looked a lot like how this season has looked, where they really struggled to generate shots. They'd go entire periods with 2 or 3 shots on goal. And so I think they probably aren't entirely sold that Montgomery can get them to play a way that wins in the playoffs, would be my guess if I had to.
He's Scott McLaughlin, WEEI.com, the Skate Podcast, and I think unofficially becoming the WEEI Afternoon Show Bruins Insider when he makes his little visits to the studio and lets us know how hot the seat is for Jim Montgomery. We'll see if the Jim Montgomery-led Bruins can turn it around. We're going to switch gears here. We're going to have a little fun. We just touched on it. I think we're going to get into Bill Belichick's social media presence over the course of Halloween, which as everyone knows, got more and more cringe-inducing by the post. Scott, thanks for stopping by, and
Thanks for
we
having
will
me.
be right back after this.